My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you're interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. You join us here today for another episode of the Do or Do Not podcast. Today, we will interview Mathew Sison. Mathew is a second-year osteopathic medical student at the NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine, Old Westbury campus. Before enrolling in medical school, Mathew completed his undergraduate at Cornell University and worked at the Mount Sinai Hospital Ican School of Medicine, conducting clinical research within the Department of Anesthesiology. While at NYCOM, Mathew has continued his research efforts at Mount Sinai as well as on campus at NYIT and at the University of Rochester. Mathew has been distinguished with several scientific research awards, including the NYCOM Student Researcher of the Year Award and the National Soma Research Spotlight Award. He has also won and placed at several national conferences, including AOCA VAPOR and Soma. In this episode, Mathew discusses his experiences and the role research has played in his medical journey so far. We hope you enjoy this episode.
All right, Matt. It's so good to have you tonight. Thank you for being with us.
Dr. Storch, thank you for having me. It's quite honestly an honor to be on the podcast, and the pleasure is mine.
Listen, we don't typically have medical students on the podcast. You're, I think, our second medical student. And specifically, we asked you to be on the podcast because you just won a research award. So can you start off by telling us about the award?
Yeah, so the award was basically off of this organization called Soma, and it's an osteopathic medical association with some of its programs kind of highlighting research efforts from medical students nationwide. And this was a monthly spotlight that I honestly felt very lucky, and I was very shocked that I won it. And it's amazing because it's a showcase to say, like, hey, there's these med students throughout the nation that are doing research. And this award was based on some research that I did over at Mount Sinai pertaining to clinical research within anesthesia. And it was really amazing because I think that, you know, just in talking with you, it really helped springboard me and kind of give me like confidence. It's like, hey, you know, this is a great thing to do. And it really goes to kind of give some recognition to not only myself, but also, you know, everyone else within the medical community that's really doing research. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to the whole idea of research and its importance and how you feel that it's helped you along the way. So can you just start, Mathew, by telling me, did you always know you wanted to become a doctor, or when did you decide that you wanted to go to medical school? And then tell us a little bit about where you grew up and about Bronx Science.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Queens, grew up to a family of Filipino immigrants, and a lot of my upbringing was surrounded based off of, you know, just like the interactions I had with my parents. And my father in particular, he was a nurse. So growing up as a child, I'd always have come home to the dinner table to stories of, you know, what happened with my dad that day, what did he see on the floor, you know, crazy cool stories. And that in conjunction, you know, with just listening to TV shows, Grey's Anatomy and whatnot, just kind of playing on those 8 p.m. late nights. I said, hey, you know, like this was in the back of my head that medicine was something very cool. And it was throughout, I'd say like middle school, leading into high school. And I kind of bridged together that I had an affinity for the STEM subjects such as math and science. I don't think they liked me back that much, but definitely science was something fun. And throughout high school and college, I said, okay, like I think medicine is something that I could look to. And so to talking about high school and Bronx Science actually is a really good segue into how I got started with research as a whole.
Mathew, can you tell us a little bit about what Bronx Science is? Because a lot of our listeners are not from New York. And how did you end up there?
Yeah, so Bronx Science was, well, they call it a specialized high school. And it's essentially one of several high schools within the New York City metro area that you essentially have to take an entrance exam for. There's other schools like Stuyvesant High School, Brooklyn Technical High School, and they're all sprinkled with that within the New York City, all the boroughs. And Bronx Science was just the one that I chose because at the time it was the one that I heard most of that had a very nice bus and transport system. So it got me from point A to point B. And at the time, one of the subjects that they offered was something along the lines of you could either take research or you could take robotics. And from that, I said, well, I don't know too much about robotics, and research seems pretty fun. And that's kind of that segue that I took into where I am now.
So what kind of research did you do there? And was it intimidating as a high school student to work on a research project?
Definitely. So the way that it worked in our school was we had this Intel Science Talent Search competition that was open to our school as well as like a nationwide. And so the class was just an intro to science, intro to research, and it could be anything between, biology, social science, and whatnot. And I chose social science because at the time I was very intimidated by anything related to, hardcore bench research. And I said, hey, this would be an easy segue without really kind of stepping too deep into the unknown at the time. And so a lot of the research that I did was within social science. I did it at St. Francis College, and it was with regards to decision making and how frameworking affected the context for young adult decision making. And it was a wonderful experience. I have not really continued with social science since then, and I've really just moved on to clinical research.
Now, were you designing your own project or were you put with a mentor? How did that work at that point?
It was kind of like a choose your own adventure type format. So within the class, we had the assignment to find our own mentor, and with that, find the ability to, on your own time, make a project, whether it was your own project individually or if it was something that your mentor already had. And so my mentor at the time, Dr. Michelle Hirsch, we came up with an experiment to kind of see how at the time the novel release of electronic cigarettes or e-cigs, now is like a vapes, how its marketing really affected the consumer's choice within young adults to, buy these e-cigarettes. And that was something that between the two of us, Dr. Hirsch and I, we kind of just did that on our own. And in conjunction with my projects, we were learning things within class, like how to do research, how to build a protocol, how to conduct statistical analysis. And it was amazing because at the same time that I was doing my project, creating my own little world, there were other students, like a lot of my friends, and they were doing their own projects. And so cumulatively, I was able to really get a good grasp of, okay, this is what research is. This is like the breadth that it could be. And there's so much more out there in the world that has yet to be found out. And I think having that research experience very early on, kind of in an innocent manner, with no strings attached, really just saying like, hey, there's this class out there that you can do. It kind of opened me up to, the power of research and like what it can hold for the future of science. And I know that's something that's said kind of thrown around here and there nowadays, like, oh, you got to do research for the future generations of science and medicine. But I really believe that, and it's really amazing. I think that no matter what the research is, it's really the impacts you have. It translates, and I think that's something that people should know, and no matter their role.
Yeah, that's great, Mathew, because I think a lot of pre-meds and a lot of medical students just think, I need to get research in order to get the program in order to get into medical school, in order to get the program that I want. And they're not thinking about making a contribution. So I think enjoying it and knowing that you're contributing and making a difference is important. So can you tell us, Mathew, two parts? One, do you think the research helped you with getting into college? Did your choice of college change based on the fact that you were interested in research? And were you pre-med when you started? And tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
For sure. So research I was very lucky to be in the research program and to have competed in a few competitions within my time as a high school senior and student overall. So I won a few awards here and there, and I can't say that it didn't hurt my application. It definitely helped. But I think the biggest thing that it really helped me look towards was that I wanted to pursue a career path, or I wanted to pursue a further education in the STEM sciences. At the time, I was doing social science, but I also really I was inching towards medicine. And it was kind of these little tidbits here and there that confirmed hey, this is something I want to do. And it definitely helped me play a role with looking at the colleges that I wanted to go to, because when I eventually accepted Cornell as the university of my choice, I said, hey, this is a program that has a long history of having a strong science foundation, having a strong foundation as a stepping board and stepping stone for medicine. And I think it's really that trajectory that helped me to say okay, with my previous experiences in research, it kind of gave me some experience to say okay, the medicine is something that I'd like to do. I think with choosing the colleges too, it was mostly I wanted to do something that was very science related. And at that point, it was just wherever you could get into is where you're going to go. And I definitely felt that way with med school too.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. But yeah, Cornell is great. Tell us a little bit about Cornell, and did you do research while you were there, and then how you decided what you were going to do after you finished college?
Yeah, so I did have a few research experiences within Cornell, albeit it wasn't as dedicated as it was before college and high school, nor was it as dedicated during my gap years before entering medical school. And so when I started in the beginning, so in the first 2 years of college, I did a few research projects related to public health efforts. I had a summer program at Weill Cornell. At the time it was called the Urban Semester Program, and there you could spend a summer shadowing physicians and kind of engaging in projects. And so at that time, I worked with Dr. Safford from the internal medicine department, and it was just trying to relate different modes of communications and platforms to help patients at the time get a better grasp of the doctor-patient experience. And so that was my first college experience with research. And from that point, it was just a summer, and I didn't end up continuing on with it in full. And what ended up happening was I kind of started bouncing around different projects, really because I liked the idea of research and I liked what I was doing. I liked the idea of research and I liked doing it, but I didn't quite yet find my niche for what I wanted to do. And that set me on this very long, windy course of doing things not really related to medicine at all. And I took a stab in a bird lab in the Cornell's lab of ornithology. And I think that was honestly a very fun experience. At the time, actually, I didn't realize that it was one of the most premier ornithology labs. So when I went there, it was like the American Museum of Natural History on steroids. And to this day, I always tell people, when you go up to Ithaca, definitely check out that lab. And so after that, I said, whoa, this is fun. But, what do I really want to do? And so I took a step back and said, within my interest and my experiences so far, what did I really enjoy? And I really enjoyed being in the hospital. And for whatever reason, I said, okay, that's what I want to pursue. And in my junior year, in that summer, I decided to volunteer at the Mount Sinai Hospital to do, at the time, I really wasn't sure what it was. I wanted to do something something that was very clinical. And so I volunteered within the anesthesia department. That kind of set the course for my first experience with clinical research. And that kind of summed up my college experience, because from that point, it kind of led as a stepping stone for my gap years leading into medical school.
For pre-medical students that are listening, that are trying to get some ideas on how they maybe dip their toe in the pool or get some experience before they start applying to medical school, or maybe just try to find if this is what they want to do. Tell us a little bit about what you did with the anesthesia department, what you actually were doing as you were volunteering there, and then how that spun into your gap year.
For sure. And I think one of the reasons why I talked about that very long, convoluted college experience was because when I decided to continue research as a gap during my 2 gap years before med school, I really backed away and said, okay, the number one question based off of these experiences was, okay, I don't want to go on this like very long winding path again. What is it that I actually want to do? What is it that makes me happy? And what can I really see myself doing? And so those questions that I had, they were very vague. They were very, I don't want to say like philosophical, but they were questions that you kind of ask yourself that are a little bit more removed from the technicalities of med school and making yourself a competitive applicant. But at the end of the day, it was like, okay, I will be strongest and most happy when I'm doing something that I'm very passionate about. And so when in thinking about the pre-medical students and even the medical students now, that is the number one thing that I'd like to stress. It's like making sure that whatever it is that you pursue, it's something that you definitely have an interest in, or that you could see yourself doing. And so in kind of having those questions, maybe like even not even like a straightforward answer, but like a vague inkling of that, just kind of starting around with like, okay, like this is the trajectory that I want to go on. And based off of my experiences, really just kind of like tripping on one opportunity after the other. So the way I did it was I really just started not necessarily cold calling, but really just like, sending out mass emails and like, hey, like I'm interested in blah, 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 and your research. I'd love for the opportunity to get started with you. And that's kind of really how I started with Sinai. And so within Sinai, what I did was I did clinical research within the Department of Anesthesiology.
Mathew, so you sent out these letters, and let's say the gastroenterology department would have sent you a letter, then you may have been doing that. Is that correct? Like, is it just like the anesthesia department answered the emails and said, yeah, that sounds great, we'd love to have you, and that's how you ended up in that direction? Did you get a couple of responses, or how did you specifically end up? And were there other hospitals? Was it different hospitals you were sending out to, and you just got a letter from the Mount Sinai anesthesia department? How did it all work out?
Yeah, for sure. So I knew that I had an interest working with anesthesia because from my experiences, that was a field where I could dip into one case and they were doing like a colonoscopy, and then in another case they were doing a delivery. And so I told myself like, hey, I know I want to do medicine, but I don't know what specialty. So I said, let me just do anesthesia. And within doing anesthesia, I figured that it was actually something that was pretty cool. So I started emailing the head of the anesthesia research departments within several hospitals. And it just so happened that Mount Sinai got back to me first. And I emailed them and said like, hey, like I'd like to do some research. And I didn't really target a specific project, but I said that, oh, here's some mentors that I'd like to work with. And actually, so the first time that I did that, it didn't end up falling into place. And I got led to another physician. His name was Dr. Katz, who I very much appreciate. And to this day, I still work with. And so he was the doctor that I ended up spending what is now the majority of my research experience with.
Mathew, was this a paid position that they offered you, or a volunteer position?
Yeah, so initially it started off as a volunteer position. I volunteered for one summer, and I spoke with Dr. Katz at the conclusion of my volunteering position or the summer. And I said, hey, Dr. Katz, this is something that I really enjoyed. I think I found a real spark in working, not only with the projects that I was put on, but also like with the team. And I really like the vibe here. And so that led on to another series of conversations in which ended up as a paid position as a clinical research coordinator for 2 years.
So tell us a little bit, Mathew, about what specific type of research you were doing at Mount Sinai and what your specific role was. Because again, I think that's another question that students have. okay, I'm just a student. What am I going to be doing? What does quote unquote research actually mean? So maybe for you, you could tell us about what you did and what your role was.
For sure. That's a great question. So what I did was I was a clinical research coordinator within the Department of Anesthesiology, doing projects within obstetric anesthesiology. And as an aside for all the pre-medical students out there who maybe even taking gap years or looking for positions, the clinical research coordinator is a very common role, and it's one of many research positions that you can take, with the primary role being anywhere between really just assisting a lot of the team leads and the PIs or the primary investigators on their projects. So it could be helping out with tasks such as data collection, statistical analyses, kind of gathering patients and consenting patients, running tests, and those are all dependent on the type of project that you have, the how many people are in your team, and kind of like, what you're comfortable with. And I say that because, at first I started off with just, gathering data behind the scenes, and then that moved into accruing more and more roles and tasks such as, consenting patients, trying to gather data, running tests. And by the conclusion of all of that, I ended up doing a lot of what was significant components of each research project, whether it was drafting the protocols itself or writing the manuscript or all the things in between. And the thing that I would like to note is that although I was like a research coordinator, and what I saw from a lot of other of my friends who were researchers during their gap years, although you may have the title of a research coordinator, and on Google, it may say something along the lines of, like drafting IRBs and like working behind the scenes and sitting on a desk all day. They're just titles, they're just roles. And, whether it's you stepping out of your boundaries or whatever you're comfortable with and asking your team, say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to dip my toes in this and that. That's totally something that is common practice within the clinical research world, especially as a pre-medical student. And it's really up to you a lot of the time to say like, hey, this is kind of what I want to do. And it just so ends up that the clinical research coordinator was the title that was stamped on my payroll.
So basically you're saying that you weren't just behind a desk, you were out, you were talking to patients, you were consenting them, you were getting them enrolled in the trial. So you were active and writing manuscripts. And as you said, for those students that don't understand IRB, you were, writing the protocols and making sure that the organization that made sure that the protocol is appropriate approved it.
Right.
So everything.
Yeah, everything. I think it was definitely partly, I don't want to say my fault, but I was very overly joyous to say, hey, Dr. Katz, I want to get involved in as many things as I can and as much as I could handle. And at the conclusion of the 2 years there, I had found myself in a position where I was spearheading a lot of the projects that were being conducted within his realm of the anesthesia department. And it was really fun because at the same time, and something that I'm very appreciative of as a result of these experiences, was that I got to see from my own perspective, what was it like to be within the field of medicine. And more importantly, it allowed me to answer, what was it like to be, a doctor or a physician or, someone within the hospital on a day-to-day basis? Or what was it like to be within the field of something that I was particularly interested in, which was academic medicine? And as well as, what was it like to be in the OR for, a few hours a day or for the whole day? And what was it like to not leave the OR?
Mathew, I want to go a little more into your journey and what you're doing now, but just so it's not so abstract, again, this whole idea of research seems so abstract. Give us an idea. And it sounds like you're involved in a lot of projects, but maybe one or two projects, just a general idea of what you were looking at and what you were doing.
For sure. So a big emphasis that I had even now within my research efforts in conjunction with Dr. Katz is within pregnant populations, trying to analyze their blood profiles and seeing what information we can have from sampling their blood and how we can use that data in real time to assist during deliveries such as C-sections and vaginal deliveries. And so that was what I spent most of my time doing. And that's what I spend a lot of my time now doing, especially in conjunction with trying to mold that or utilize that data with these new types of testing called viscoelastic testing or rotational thromboelastometry. It's a very, very big word. I don't even know if I could really spell it on the dot like that. But the abbreviation for that is called ROTEM. And a lot of the projects that I had were really just testing out these machines and saying, hey, we have this new device, we have this new way of testing, and we're looking at this essentially minority population, and how can we find ways to better serve and make for more efficient and organized and effective intra or perioperative protocols, whether it be things like, can we do something? Can we, give like a different type of medication, or can we go about a procedure in a different way? And that is a lot of what the research I'm doing now is. And there's other projects that I did that are very related to, or more related to anesthesia in the perspective of pain management. A lot of what I did was testing the different efficacies of different protocols relating to opioid use. And this was actually something that sparked a particular interest in me, especially with relation to the opioid crisis. So trying to find ways to manage patients' pain within the perioperative period with or without either different opioids or rather, opioid alternatives. And that was a lot of the research I did at Sinai. One of the bigger research efforts that I did was over this past summer. I was able to do a research fellowship at Rochester as part of, there's this anesthesia organization called ASA, and they have a medical student summer fellowship called FAIR MSARF. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity if given the chance. And with that, you spend a summer and you get to do research nationwide. And I did that over the summer at Rochester, at University of Rochester at Strong Hospital. And that was actually where I took a stab at basic science. And I did a lot of bench work relating to trying to elucidate the mechanisms behind volatile anesthetics, which at the time of entering the program, or as a result of my first year of med school, I didn't realize that a lot of the mechanisms behind commonly used anesthetics were virtually unknown. So that was something that was very interesting to me. And I said, hey, I'll take a stab at it. Maybe we'll poke around and find something out. And yeah, that's the research I've been doing since.
Mathew, you're a busy man. Very cool. So I'm going to take a little turn right now and just ask you, when did you first become aware of osteopathic medicine and what a DO was? And tell us a little bit about your application process and how your research background came up during interviews.
Definitely, for sure. So a lot of the friends that I had throughout high school and college ended up going to medical school, and just by virtue of a lot of my friends being diehard New Yorkers who wanted to stay on Long Island, a lot of them either ended up within schools within Long Island, and a lot of them ended up actually at NYIT-Com. And so that was my first real encounter with osteopathic medicine. And I started asking myself these questions. So what is osteopathic medicine? I'd see it in the hospital. There's like the MD, DO, think anything much of it until I really encountered osteopathic medicine. And that kind of just put me on this trajectory of saying, wow, what is it? And so initially it started off as like a Google search before I started asking osteopaths themselves, what is osteopathy? And it really didn't click with me until I met a physician at Sinai who was very big on mindfulness and really trying to incorporate a holistic type of perspective into not only the care and the healthcare and the work that you do, but really just how you go about life. And so in a very abstract way, between the conversations I had with that doctor, his name is Dr. Jeffrey Zahn. I like to thank him very much for that. Those conversations and mindfulness as a whole. Throughout those conversations, it really changed my perspective as to, hey, as I'm pursuing medicine, how would I want to go about practicing as a physician, and how can I kind of bolster that perspective, and how can I grow that within my education and my training and so forth. And so when it came time to applications, I was kind of really, it was like a fork in the road, I'd want to say. But then at the same time, it wasn't, because I knew that I wanted to go to medicine either way. But I was very interested in going into osteopathic medicine because of all those, because of the perspective of me saying like, hey, like this is the type of physician that I want to be to become. And so that led to me applying to various schools, NYIT-Com, Toro, and a few colleges, or a few like schools kind of just within the East Coast, just because I want to stay close to New York for whatever reason. And throughout the process, I always ask myself like, hey, what does research mean to me? And like ultimately, what role is it going to play in my process as an applicant? And truthfully enough, it did come up in a few interviews with questions such as, what does research mean to you? All the way down to, hey, I saw in your results that you had this XYZ. Let's talk about it. So it was, from whether it was very vague to very specific, it was an excellent and a fun time to kind of self-reflect on what research meant to me and kind of see what kind of impact it made throughout my application process as a pre-medical student. And I guess in reflection of that now, it's definitely played a major role in my journey to becoming both an osteopathic physician and really like a medical student first and foremost. It was something that was brought up a lot, and I think it was something void of the weight that medical schools or admissions officers would place on you. Research to me was something that became very central to my character and my core of who I was, or like what strengths I had and what I could kind of bounce around and grow from. So I was very thankful again to have research and like all those experiences, because it helped me to develop certain aspects of my character. And it just so happened to come up as something that I could, talk about. And it was a question that I wasn't too intimidated by when the interviewers came to asking questions.
Mathew, I think one of the things that impressed me the most when I called you to ask you if you would come on and speak with us was that you were so positive and excited about being at NYIT-Com. And I personally remember being the same way. So can you talk to us a little bit just about your experience so far and your excitement? Because I think it's infectious in a great way. And then can you tell us how the hell you're doing medical school and doing research at the same time, and how you have time for all this stuff?
Well, I can start off with the thank you for that. I can start off with the latter question. I don't know how it's happening. It's kind of just happening all at once, but I'm thankful because without a doubt, a lot of what I'm able to do is really just in part to kind of the community that I'm surrounded by. And so that leads to when I first came across NYIT, of course, it was something that was very close to home and close to my support networks, but also from the anecdotal stories that I had from, upperclassmen who were my friends at NYIT. It was a very, collegial space that you could kind of either do your own thing and kind of just be your own person, or you could grow and develop and like amongst other people. And there's going to be support in kind of whatever fashion that you feel that is that is like most suitful towards you. And that was something that I didn't quite understand at the time, because I was like, oh, like, hey, in med school, all you're going to do is study for the preclinical years, and then after that there's rotations, and then after that there's you're a doctor then. And it didn't really make sense to me. But then a lot of the nuances that I'm appreciating about kind of just chancing upon NYT at this point was that I was surrounded by like a very nice support network, and there's a lot of people who are like-minded. They all share the same goals, and everyone wants to help each other. And so I was very thankful for that. And within NYIT, I think, aside from the people, the students there, it's nice that, not only do you have a big class size because you have this, wide breadth of people who are kind of coming from all different walks of life, but you also have a very strong and helpful administration that, helps with whatever your needs are, whether it's like accommodations or you just want someone to talk to. The administration there and the mentorship that they have and the individual mentors that they give you at NYT are something that I definitely have preached about to people who are looking to go into medical school and they're choosing, hey, like, where do I want to go? That's definitely one of the pluses that I see at NYIT. And I think because of all of that, in conjunction with me just being a little crazy, I guess, is I'd say how I'm able to attempt balancing and trying to work at balancing between completing the tasks that I have as a medical student and then pursuing my passions as a researcher within the medical field.
Mathew, you're awesome. And I don't know how you have time for it either. I think you're crazy, but it's awesome. And I think you're going to do a lot. I think you're going to go really far. Mathew, you did 2 gap years and you worked in anesthesia and you're in med school and you're still working with anesthesia, but you have not done your clinical rotations yet. I know you did the bird rotation and that was not for you. Are you set on anesthesia or are you keeping your mind open? And maybe you saw some other things while you were doing anesthesia that you thought were interesting. I mean, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like definitely one of the most asked questions whenever I work with anesthesia residents or attendings. They're always like, oh, how do you know? Like, is this what you want to do? And so kind of through a lot of self-reflection and just for my own benefit, I told myself like, hey, anesthesia is something that it's a field that I'm very interested in and I'm passionate about. And I can say that genuinely, but I can also say that is the field that I've had the most experience with. And whether or not it's like a sense of comfort that I like that field, that is something that I acknowledge. And it's something that I always keep in the back of my head. And it's something that I'm looking forward to with rotations because, as I pursue rotations, I'm going to be in different specialties every few weeks, rotating around, meeting different people. And I'm definitely keeping myself open to that idea of saying like, hey, surgery might be a thing, family medicine might be a thing, OB might be a thing. Funny enough, actually, when I did OB anesthesia, I initially questioned what was I doing in OB because that was not an initial interest of mine. But then after spending some time there and kind of just appreciating the field more and more, I realized 2 things. That one, OB was very fun, I guess, especially so outside of the context of it being, one of the rotations, but also that I should keep an open mind because despite me being passionate for one thing, there might be that one day or that one rotation or that one experience that really might just change it all. And so it's not that I'm looking for it, but I think if that were to ever happen, I'd accept it. And I think that's something that really stays true to kind of pursuing something that, at the end of the day, you'll say, hey, like, I'll do it again tomorrow.
Mathew, I think you have wisdom beyond your years and see a lot of students that kind of like, oh, I want to do derm or I want to do orthopedics just based on something they read or something they saw or some idea in their head. But I think going through your rotations with an open mind, and again, especially for you when you have so much anesthesia experience to begin with, but exactly like you said, a lot of the people that we interview on the podcast, it's just they meet somebody that they click with and they just want to be like them. And that kind of sets them on their path, which again, it sounds like you've had some great experiences so far, but there's still obviously 2 years of rotations for you to figure it out. And I think whatever you do, you're going to be great. And I just really want to thank you for spending time with us and advising our pre-medical students and medical students.
Dr. Storrs, the pleasure is mine. I, again, can't thank you enough for this wonderful experience. And thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.